Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Mossy Smart, and let's just jump right into this week's questions. First question comes from Modified Gaming from YouTube. Have you seen the 2D remake of Ocarina of Time? Would you love if Nintendo actually picked it up and it became an official release? I have seen the 2D remake of Ocarina of Time and it looks awesome. It just screams nostalgia to me because it is Ocarina of Time, but it's also classic 2D Zelda. So it's all the nostalgia wrapped in one, while still seeming kind of fresh because Ocarina of Time wasn't a 2D game. In particular, I just love looking at the maps and the overworld. I remember seeing the top-down map of Kokiri Forest in the 2D world. And, I have that visually ingrained in my head what it looks like roaming around in 3D. But seeing that sort of deconverted or down to 2D, and seeing what the developers had to change things to make it look and feel right in a 2D realm, and they did an awesome job. It just looks like so much fun. I really hope they finish the game and they really polish it up, because I think it's worth it. I think it's nice. In terms of would I like if Nintendo actually picked it up and it became an official release, I'm not sure. I more so hope Nintendo doesn't step in and just pull the plug, because they've been kind of unpredictable with fan projects as of late. And I sort of view it more like the Zelda classic fan game creator, where there's all those custom Zelda classic quests. I played a few of them on the YouTube channel. I played through Lost Isle and part of Isle of Rebirth, and those are awesome. And there's dozens of other good ones. And I sort of view Ocarina of Time 2D in that realm. And it looks fun, and I hope they finish it. And this thing's been going around for a long time. If I recall, I think this project started way back in 2010, maybe even earlier. But so it's been a long journey, and I hope they keep at it. So best of luck to them. Next question comes from Miguel Perez from YouTube. Do you think the old Zelda TV series was good enough, and should they remake it? Well, I don't really know what you mean by good enough, but I felt at the time it was enjoyable. Now keep in mind the Zelda TV series came out in the late 80s when there were only two Legend of Zelda games, the original Legend of Zelda and Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. So I think the TV series, the animated series, it drew a lot from those games. And it was sort of like the previous question, but the opposite, where these were 2D sprites, and we had some official artwork for the original two games, but they turned that into a full-blown 3D animated series. So it was nice to see the Moblins and the Stalfos come to life in a 3D world. Now, it was kind of corny, and it was kind of cheesy, I should say, and not the greatest. From anime standards, it's not very good at all. It's, again, to me, nostalgia. But then again, I grew up sort of in that era, so I was able to appreciate it. I think modern or younger fans of the series probably look back at the animated series and and they might cringe a little bit, about how bad it was. I mean, I think they could remake it now if it had a more, anime has come a long way in the last, 30 years, really. And some of the, I'm not a huge anime fan, but I know there's some amazing animes out there nowadays. And could there be a Zelda anime in that realm? Absolutely, and that'd be sweet. I'm all for that, so, yeah. Next question comes from Matthew Dadun from YouTube. What do you think The Legend of Zelda could learn from games of the same formula, such as Darksiders or Okami? I can't really speak for Okami because, I've played it very limitedly. So, but Darksiders, in particular Darksiders 2, I've said this in previous mailbags, and I've sort of joked around to some of the team members, saying I view Darksiders 2 as the best Legend of Zelda console game to come out in the last 15 years. Because it's Zelda sort of on steroids to an extent. It does a lot of things Now, there's a lot of things that the Zelda series does better than Darksiders. Don't get me wrong. And there's a laundry list of things I think Darksiders 2 does great. Just picking one for the sake of argument here, though, is I think the actual gameplay, or the sword play in particular, is much more in-depth and more polished in Darksiders 2. The main protagonist, Death, he wields two dual-wielding scythes. And I just view, sort of like in the Zelda series, for the most part, it's just like hack and slash. You just go up and press your one sword button and it does an attack. In some of the 3D games, and even Minish Cap, you had some of the more sword techniques where there was jump attacks and spin attacks, and Twilight Princess had all the hidden skills. But I think it's still, the sword play was kind of limited. Darksiders has a lot more an elaborate, more like a combo system, and there's more that, you know, like as your character progresses through the game, you learn new attacks, and you can even purchase new attacks. Furthermore, there's also these skill trees where I believe there was the Harbinger and the Necromancer skill set, where one of them was more combat, like sword or scythe gameplay, where you can learn new attacks and more powerful attacks. You can like teleport underground and like appear on the other side and do it. And very in-depth combat system that it was really, really fun. The Necromancer, I believe, is more magic-based attacks, where Death would summon like a murder of crows that would go attack the enemies, or he would summon zombies and all sorts of other magical attacks. And I think the combat, how you actually battle enemies, is much more in-depth and more fun in Darksiders 2. So that's something I think Zelda could learn. There's a lot of other things I think Zelda can learn. There's a lot of things Darksiders 2 could have learned from Zelda, or taken it one step further as well. But if I could say one thing, if you've played the Legend of Zelda series, and you like, which if you're watching this video you obviously have, and you like the 3D console games, you should really give Darksiders 2 a chance. It's available. They just released the Definitive Edition on the PS4 and Xbox One, but it's also available on the Nintendo Wii U, so give it a shot. I think you'll like it. Next question comes from HD Gamer from YouTube. What's your very favorite Zelda shirt and favorite Zelda merchandise item? Well, you know, a few years ago when I was knee-deep in Zelda collecting, I'd pick up almost anything Zelda-related. However, I was sticking to the licensed material, and I kind of view that the licensed Zelda shirts, obviously they're more limited. There's a few dozen of them, though, and none of them really stand out to me too much. However, there are hundreds, of probably thousands, of fan-created Zelda shirts, and while most of them are not very good, but there's a lot of really, really, really good ones. If I had to pick one, I can't really. I mean, I like the crossover ones. I've seen like Link and Star Wars crossover shirts. I always think those are fun. And there's a few miscellaneous ones I've purchased over the years that I think I've worn in previous videos. But yeah, in terms of merchandise, I think I'm most proud of my guide collection. If you see here, I got a bunch of Zelda guides, and a lot of them that are further down that are not even viewable. That's probably the most expansive portion of my Zelda collection. It's hard to pick one particular issue, but because there's a lot of old Japanese guides that have some unique artwork, and I think I probably have over, I don't know, maybe 150, 160 actual game guides across the whole Zelda series, across different languages. They don't make them as many of them nowadays for the modern releases, but in terms of one single item, I would say it's probably the Zelda statues. In particular, the regular edition Link on Epona first four figures statue from Twilight Princess. That would be my favorite merchandise item. Alright, last question comes from Zelda Tacos from YouTube. Do you think the Game Boy Zelda titles deserve remakes quite yet? I really think this is two questions. One, do they even need to be remade? And if so, when and what? I think, well, it's worth noting that Link's Awakening already got a remake. It originally came out on the original Game Boy, but it was remade for the Game Boy Color. And it added color, it added the color dungeon, and it fixed some glitches, and there was a few other miscellaneous changes in the DX version of Link's Awakening. And I think it was great. That became the definitive version of the game. And I think there's a lot of ways you can remake games. I mean, we've seen so many Zelda remakes with, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, and now Twilight Princess, all having been remade. And a lot of them are graphical upgrades. And, sometimes there's like a new section. There's like the fishing hole in Majora's Mask, or there's going to be the Cave of Twilight in Twilight Princess. In Ocarina of Time, they had the mirrored Master Quest with double damage, hero mode. All of these things are good additions to a remake. However, I don't think that's necessarily what some of the Game Boy, the 2D Game Boy Zelda titles would need in a remake. I kind of look at like A Link Between Worlds. I almost view that as a pseudo remake of A Link to the Past. There's just so many similarities that clearly they were inspired. I mean, it's all but a remake. And I think they could do something very similar to that with, say, Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons. Not necessarily even being like interconnected games, but just like if they remade Oracle of Seasons, sort of maybe upgrading the graphics from a flat 2D plane almost, or it's not really completely flat, but more of a blimp view, almost like a 2.5D view, sort of like A Link Between Worlds. That graphical upgrade like that could do the game wonders, and then just changing things, sort of like how they've done with previous games. Maybe even, mixing up the dungeon, making a second quest. There was already a second quest at Oracle of Seasons, but more like the original Legend of Zelda, where the dungeons are all completely revamped, and it feels fresh and new. So I think if they are to remake the Game Boy titles, I think that's the way to go. And I don't even know if they need to treat them as remakes. They could basically be new games, sort of like A Link Between Worlds. But yeah, I mean, in terms of if they were like to directly, like, there's a lot of examples of remakes that Nintendo's done well in that space. Take a game like Pokemon Red. They remade it as Pokemon Fire Red. They gave it color and they added some more depth to the game. I think they did a good job with that. Even, another game would be like NES Remix. There, some of those games in NES Remix, like Balloon Fight. That was a game, that was a black label NES game, so that came out in 85, maybe 86, and it was based off Joust, the arcade game. And incredibly limited in terms of what the game is and the gameplay. I mean, it's one of those games on the NES, if you play for 20 minutes, you've basically played everything there is to play about the game. But like on the NES Remix, they added like new challenges, complete something, and like there's like a harder difficulty mode, or there's like a time setting, or they change things around, and that sort of adds a lot of replay value to games. And one thing that Nintendo really hasn't caught up on completely, at least not globally, like Sony has the trophy system on PlayStation, and the Xbox has the gamer scores, and I think Nintendo, if they had some sort of achievement system, would bring even more new life into these games. Take like Oracle of Seasons. Just if they direct ported the game with an achievement system, it might encourage people to do all of the trade secrets between ages and seasons. Or to do the hero cave, or to get all the rings. There's a lot of things that I think a lot of completionists never got, but I think an achievement system might encourage people to do that. But that would be the minimum in terms of a remake. I don't necessarily think they will or need to remake those games, but I wouldn't put it past them, and I actually think we will see something eventually, a remake of some of the games. I think they will continuously revisit older games in the series, even games they've already revisited. Sort of like Ocarina of Time. There was Ocarina of Time, there was Master Quest, there was Ocarina of Time 3D, and I've spoken before how I eventually think there will be Ocarina of Time HD. So I think in that realm, I think revisiting classic Zelda games will always continue to occur. Alright, that's going to do it for this week. Thanks for the questions, and as always, you can send in questions via email to webmaster@zeldadungeon.net. You can make a comment at the post at zeldainformer.com with your question. You can make a comment at the YouTube video where if you're watching this here, or you can post at the forums in the mailbag section. In general, I try to keep it to about 5 to 6 questions per week in about 10 minutes. But yeah, so thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next week with more questions.